So let's tool up with the hotshot lasguns and the carapace armour to take a look at some leaked rules for Kasrkin and Scions and how they're going to be shaping up in the new Guard Codex. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking Guard once more, and after having talked about the leaked rules for most of the Codex over the past week or so, I thought it was time to cover the Guard Elite and see how the Tempestus Scions and the shiny new Kasrkin appear to be shaping up in the new book. We'll take a look at both of their datasheets and just compare how some of the leaked rules are stacking up against each other and which ones are looking best at the moment. Firstly, as with many of the rest of the Guard leaks that we've been talking about over the past few days, these all come from Morty and Glory's leaked copy of the Playtester Codex. It's very good of him to share it with the internet at large, and if you got this far into the Guard release without seeing his channel, I do thoroughly recommend it for some in-depth Guard content. As per usual though, there's the normal disclaimer with leaked playtest rules. Most of these have been fairly accurate so far, but there have been some things that are a little bit off. Sometimes you can have minor changes between the playtest copies and the final Codex publication, though for the most part they do tend to be at least fairly accurate, with most of the things being the same and just a few tweaks if that. I'll certainly be reviewing the entire Guard Codex when we have it, and hopefully getting unit reviews done for the majority of the big units, so feel free to subscribe to Warspecs Tactics if you'd like to see those. In any case though, on with today's subject at hand, and I thought we'd take a look at both of the datasheets in turn and then compare some of the differences. Kasrkin in the new Guard book appeared to be an elite's choice for 105 points according to the leaks. That buys you a big squad full of 10 models, and it looks like there's no option to take them in squads less than 10, so kind of like the infantry squads, you're either getting 10 or none. I feel like that to start off with isn't exactly great news, to be honest. Having smaller squads is really quite flexible, and it does mean that you're basically committing them to be a damage dealer unit as opposed to the Scions being a bit more flexible and being able to come down in smaller numbers. In terms of keywords, they also seem to get the core and platoon keywords, meaning that you'll be able to access most orders for them and get reroll orders and things like that. I feel like as infantry go, they're probably going to be some of the best targets for any orders or things that you can do for them. Things like take aim with the rumoured +1 to hit and extra AP looks like it could be a staple for these guys. Statline wise, they're kind of similar to Scions in the previous edition of the Codex. A 6-inch move, weapon skill 4+, but ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness 3, 1 wound, 2 attacks, leadership 6 or a 7 on the sergeant, so a little bit lower there, and a 4+ save with the carapace armour. The extra attack is quite fun. It does mean that they might potentially be able to bully light infantry just a little bit in combat, but otherwise pretty much what you'd expect for Guard veterans in carapace armour. They get to shoot a bit straighter with those hot shots and special weapons than most. Talking of which, for their war gear choices, the hotshot lasguns are 24-inch range, rapid fire 1, strength 3, AP -2, and damage 1. The big change for those is that they've gone out to 24-inch range, out from 18 that they were before. Really quite big, as it means that their rapid fire range gets a bit longer. The AP does mean that they'll generally chip away some wounds from most targets, but only strength 3 means that they're going to be limited threats to big heavy stuff. There was that rumoured stratagem that 6s to wound could get them some mortal wounds from a big squad of hot shots, so that could be interesting if it does make sense to fill them with quite a lot of hot shots more than special weapons. It seems that one Kasrkin gets a melter mine for free. He's the guy who's modelled with the demo jacket out of the big squad. It appears that that just gives the squad the melter mine keyword, the one that allows you to mortal wounds on vehicles or monsters in melee, plus makes the vicious trap stratagem a little bit better, giving you a +1 to the roll for the mortal wounds there. Then in terms of special weapons, the kit is actually reasonably generous in terms of them. You get 2 of each type, and basically those choices are represented in how many specials the squad can take. 4 models can take a special weapon, but you can't take more than 2 of each. If you just wanted some close range punch against heavier armoured targets, then that'd probably be 2 plasma guns and 2 melter guns. If you just wanted to coat the foe in loads of hotshot volley fire though, it does include the hotshot volley gun with its new profile, 30-inch range now, rapid fire 2, and strength 4, AP -2, damage 1. Kind of an interesting side grade on the old profile, which was a heavy 4-shot, slightly less damage at long range, but slightly more damage up close, seeing as you don't take the move and shoot penalty. I think it's going to be hard to turn down the plasma and melter for most choices, but the hotshot volley gun doesn't seem too bad. On top of that, the squad also gets a hotshot sniper rifle for free, and at least on paper it maybe looks a little bit better than the standard hotshots, though maybe not by a whole load. You get a single shot at 36-inch range, heavy 1, strength 4, AP -2, and interestingly a big flat damage of 3. You get to ignore lookout surf for it, and you have that normal sniper style rule where you get a mortal wound on a 6 to wound. If the squad's moving, and I suspect it often will be, then it would mean that you would be taking the penalty to hit a lot of the time, but even so, getting a pip of extra strength, longer range and more damage does look like it could be worth it overall. Finally, the sergeant gets some melee weapons. You have the option to take a plasma pistol and power sword. Both of those cost 5 points each, and although it's not documented on these leaks, I suspect that you also get a Voxcaster in the squad for free as well. Overall, I could say a typical loadout for the squad being something like 2 plasma, 2 melter, 1 sniper, and the rest hotshot volley guns. That'd be a pretty brutal squad that could take on quite a lot of threats. Finally, for their special rules, as was mentioned by Games Workshop, they get an extra regimental doctrine for free, so it sounds like you get the standard 2 that you have for your entire regiment, whichever combo you think works best for the army, and they can pick an extra one to make themselves a bit better. We don't know these 100% yet, though we do have the leaked ones. Out of the leaked ones, I feel like maybe the most interesting ones might be the ignores cover within 18 inches. That could be quite nice, seeing as the squad usually wants to be shooting within 18 inches to start with. Or potentially, if you're thinking about putting them in a Chimera or Taurox or something, you could have the one where they get to disembark after moving in the vehicle. That seems like it could be a very reliable way just to deliver them to the front lines, and perhaps it's the sort of thing that you want targeted to one unit, as opposed to across the whole army, affecting a whole load of units that it won't have any effect on. Otherwise, it does look like they don't get grav shoots like the Scions do, unfortunately, so no built-in deep strike for the Kasrkin, it would seem. That looks like it could well be the main trading point between them. The Scions get the deep strike and the Kasrkin don't, so you'd likely want to deliver them in some other way, something like a transport with a Chimera or Taurox to get that firepower in range. I can't help but think that foot slogging them is probably a bad idea. The carapace armour isn't really enough to make up for the additional points that they cost, and without some way to deliver them, I just think that they get shot to ribbons before they get to properly be effective. Overall though, they do seem to pack a lot of firepower, and hitting on 3s for the points cost are likely going to be a good focal point for orders and things. I feel like it's looking fairly positive for them being pretty effective in the new book. Let me know what you think though. Would this stat line, accompanied by orders and stuff, be enough to make you want to put them on the table? Moving on to the Scion side of things now, there's obviously a lot of similarities, but there are a few differences as well. First up, they're very slightly more expensive. They're 11 points per model rather than the 10.5 effectively that the Kasrkin are, but they can still be taken in flexible squad sizes, as you'd expect from the kit that they get. You can field them in anywhere between 5 and 10 of them. At least as per these leaks, they also apparently get the core and platoon keywords, so it does sound like with Games Workshop's new mixed regiments and things like that, the Scions might be able to make use of orders from other things just as easily as everything else. That would be really quite cool, and they'd feel maybe a little bit less peripheral to the Codex then. Though admittedly, it would be a slight flavour loss in my opinion, as it does look like those custom Scion regiments are likely gone, and they're maybe just going to be brought in a bit more to the rest of the Guard fold. I guess they'd probably keep a Tempestus Scion keyword on them, and that would give them access to a few other synergies, things like the Refractor Field and the Scion Command Squad, plus potentially there might be other things like stratagems that we don't know about yet. Otherwise, their stat line does seem really quite similar to the Kasrkin, and basically how it was before. Compared with the Kasrkin, it looks like they get an extra pip of leadership, and compared with their previous profile, they get 2 attacks where previously they had 1. Otherwise, weapon-wise, they're maybe a little bit more limited than the Kasrkin are. They still get their hotshot las guns, and the similar options for paying for the sergeant weapons, but getting the special weapons free, and they do follow the similar Kasrkin type pattern with the special weapons. You can take 2 per 5. If you've only got a squad of 5, then you can only take 1 of each individual one, and if you have a squad of 10, then you can take up to 2 of each, basically following the kits, and the way the Games Workshop's usually been playing it for 9th edition. Otherwise though, their special rules are kind of interesting. Instead of getting the custom doctrine that the Kasrkin get, they instead just get exploding 6s to hit, both at shooting and in melee. That's a pretty solid flat damage boost, if that does wind up being correct. From expected damage output, it's usually going to be equivalent to having an effective 2+ ballistic skill, and that'll be feeling very nice whenever you roll a 6 on those special weapons. While the Kasrkin apparently can't deep strike, these guys still can of course, and that does mean that you wouldn't need to invest in a transport or anything for them, compared with the Kasrkin who might need something to get them into battle safely. Again, if you're going for deep strike damage dealers, it might be best to take a plasma gun and melter gun. That could let them at least threaten some hard targets, I guess. There are still definitely things that I'd like to see from the main codex to find out about, just to confirm who can order them and whether it has to be the Tempestors or whether it can be anyone. And I believe that from one of the earlier leaks there was a talk of them being able to get objectives secured and troops again if you did take them in complete Scion detachments or by themselves. I think that would be really nice if they keep that in. If they don't, then basically it's not really going to be possible to play pure Scions as an army anymore, and that would be kind of sad. Just with a patrol or something, it might actually be worth the 2 CP to have multiple Scion squads become OBSEC. They are quite interesting to be able to drop around and snatch objectives, perhaps particularly jumping out the back of a Valkyrie or something, which is supposedly going to be able to put them in really close to the enemy, just outside 6 inches. Before we talk about comparing the two, I thought I'd just quickly mention the Scion Command Squad, which we did talk about in a different video. You now get the Tempestor and the Command Squad all bundled together, and they have kind of changed in nature a bit. You're not really going to be able to spam special weapons efficiently anymore, as you have to take all different ones. So they really are going to be folded into a bit more of a leadership role, as opposed to individual squads going off and doing do or die missions. The Tempestor can only issue order to Scions, as you might expect, but we don't know yet whether or not they can get orders from other sources. I'm genuinely not sure what they'll decide on that. And otherwise, for interesting stuff, the Tempestor can take that command rod, which now allows him to know the Prefector's orders as well. And they have the same Voxcaster, Standard, and Medic. The Standard could allow some reroll ones for Tempestor Scions, and the Vox could allow them to broadcast orders from a fair bit further away. A very different unit to what they were, though. I think 110 points does seem kind of steep for a unit that's so fragile and might be dropping into danger. Still, though, getting something like Take Aim on multiple different Scion squads dealing damage could be worth it. In any case, going back to the battle line units once more, though, they do look like there are some positives for the Kasrkin and some positives for the Scions. For the Kasrkin, of course, I think their biggest selling point would be the extra regimental doctrine, in particular ignoring cover at close range and the disembark after transport moving, though the latter one is only rumoured at this point and hasn't yet been confirmed by Games Workshop. If it is the case though, then it could make them very easy to deliver. Otherwise, I'd say most of the rest are kind of minor things. They're very slightly cheaper at 10.5 points per model versus 11. They get that free hotshot sniper rifle, which is a small upgrade over the standard I think. They have the Meltermind keyword, which most of the time won't do anything, but every so often just might come in handy I guess. And they perhaps do have access to some better transports in the Chimeras and the Tauroxes. You're not forced to pay premiums for big guns on the transports like Taurox Primes, not that that's necessarily always a bad thing. As for the Scions, they do have the positive that they can be taken in small squads of 5, which I think really is quite nice, and a lot of people will likely choose to. You don't see all that many people running enormous massed up units of Scions at the moment. Often running multiple small units just tends to be a bit more efficient. And the other two major positives are that they can deep strike for free, so you don't necessarily need to invest in pricey transports and things, and they have those exploding 6s to hit, making their ranged attacks just generally a bit more efficient than the Kasrkins will get. Otherwise, they also have the small bonus of +1 leadership, which with guard taking casualties fairly quickly, I think that will come into handy once every so often. And plus it looks like they will be getting a bunch of other Codex synergies, things like their own command squad, the refractor field, and their own transports in the Taurox Prime and the Valkyrie getting a bit better for them. I feel like they maybe are a unit that might get some big positives or negatives though from the way that the core guard rules wind up working and how much they get access to. Based just on the leaks so far though, I do feel that Scions are probably looking like slightly the better option to me. The exploding 6s just looks like it's usually going to give them some slightly flat better damage, and both free deep strike and smaller squads I think are pretty decent advantages on top of that. If there weren't any other big factors swinging you one way or the other, and nothing else changes from here to the Codex, I feel that Kasrkin could still be very interesting though. They might be just a bit more optimal to run in transports if they can indeed take that regimental doctrine for disembarking after moving. You could be getting them right onto objectives and firing those hotshots down the enemy's throat basically from turn 1, and might wind up being one of the best mechanized infantry units that you can field in the new book. Let me know your thoughts though. Out of the leaks so far, which are you feeling are shaking me up to be better? Are you on Team Scion or Team Kasrkin right now? Let me know down in the comments, and how likely you think you're going to be to field them when the new book comes out. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular videos coming. I'll certainly be aiming to post quite a bit more for the Guard, both a full Codex review, then individual unit reviews for quite a few key things. Certainly looking forward to getting to grips with the Guard Codex in depth. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel and you'd like to help keep them coming, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can continue to make videos like this quite so regularly. If you are enjoying a lot, then any support is massively appreciated. It is what keeps the videos coming so much. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early each week, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.